Jarvis, you there?
At your service, sir.
When you think of Hollywood, you automatically think of heavyweight names such as Leonardo DiCaprio, Ryan Gosling, and Ryan Reynolds. But there's one name in Hollywood whose total net worth is way more than these actors, and that is the Iron Man himself, Mr. Robert Downey Jr. Let's take a look at how much he's worth and what he does with all this money. While Leonardo DiCaprio has a net worth of $260 million, Robert Downey Jr. takes the cake with $300 million, making him the highest paid actor in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not only that, but he is well on his way to being one of the richest in the entire industry as well. So how does Hollywood's real-life multi-millionaire spend all his cash? And more importantly, how he ended up acquiring such deep pockets? Robert Downey Jr. has been in the industry for a long time. He has acted in many films before entering the Marvel franchise and making millions and millions from every Marvel film. Not only that, but one source of his cash is the investments he has in his own company and a ton of various sponsorships that has earned our Iron Man a net worth of, wait for it, $300 million. For a layperson earning the average American income, it would take more than 5,000 years to match that. However, it wasn't always heavy wallets for Downey Jr. Of course, today he is widely known as his Marvel character, Iron Man. However, Downey Jr. has a much wider acting palette and a far more diverse resume than just Marvel. Before playing a superhero, he had already starred in tons of TV and films like Game 6, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Ally McBeal, and Tropic Thunder. But before becoming the superhero heartthrob he is now, Robert Downey Jr. was quite a different man. Born in Manhattan, New York, Downey Jr. had his fair share of mistakes, finding himself on the wrong side of the law far more often than he would like to admit. He ended up in bars, in rehabilitation facilities with a secured space in every tabloid to pelt down rocks at. One time when he was facing trial, a judge had told him that he was manipulative and had exhausted the court's options and the court's patience, and thus, he was sentenced to jail for 3 years for repeatedly violating probation. With all this craziness, Downey Jr.'s career took a massive hit in the early 2000s. Of course, he still had a hefty bank balance supporting him, although it was nowhere near the $300 million stash he's sitting on now. So after going through his bad boy phase, a comeback rising from the ashes was very much due, and it sure came, probably making it the biggest the industry has ever seen. After landing what turned out to be quite a life-changing role of Tony Stark in the first Iron Man film, RDJ pocketed around $500,000, but because of his past, studios considered him to be quite a risky hire, which is why they weren't prepared to haul the entire show on his shoulders. However, once he nailed the role, the sky was the limit for Downey Jr. After that, he kept coming out with hits after hits, with Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, The Avengers, and the rest of the Marvel appearances that followed. It was because of these roles and the massive contracts he had signed with Marvel Studios that made his net worth what it is today. Heck, he made $75 million for Avengers Endgame alone, so you pretty much get the picture. So what does he do with the overflowing cash? Cars and houses? Well, yes, but let's take a look at his most Tony Stark expenditure. Robert Downey Jr. owns a life-size remote-control Iron Man suit because, why not? However, this 6-foot suit cost him a whopping $300,000 to serve as a reminder of his time as the iconic character. And yes, it is taller than RDJ himself and was designed by a master model maker named Greg Tanis from rcsuperhero.com. The reason why it's so high quality is because it lights up and has a wider range of remote-controlled movements. And even though it wasn't RDJ who actually bought it for himself, despite how egotistical his character is, it was actually his staff that purchased it for his birthday. But whoever got it, it's still a sizable chunk of his total assets. That's not the only souvenir he has from his time as Tony Stark. Even though this next item may not be as expensive with a price tag of $4,000, it could very well be the most sentimental item that the Hollywood actor owns, and that is the A emblem from the Avengers films, the only letter that survived the attack on Stark Towers in the Battle for New York scene. According to legend, RDJ had walked up to his studio executives and asked them if there was any chance he could take the giant 30-foot-tall A emblem home. The next he knew, there was a truck pulling up outside his house with the infamous A strapped to the back. Of course, not having a big enough house to store the giant A is not a problem that RDJ could have. In fact, his mini houses also have space to store a lot of cars as well. So naturally, a big-shot Hollywood actor with hundreds of millions of dollars to spend would not have one car, but tens of them. RDJ owns the Audi R8 that cost him $169,900. This car can also be spotted in nearly every Iron Man movie as well. He also has the custom Boss 302 Mustang with a 5.0-liter V8 roar, setting him back a couple $100,000, a similar price to his Ferrari California T and a Fisker Karma, the world's first production luxury plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. He also has a Nissan GT-R and a Mercedes S550 that are each worth over $100,000. He has also been seen driving another Audi R8 from 2008 worth $116,000, a Mercedes SL 550 coupe convertible, an Audi A7, and a Bentley Continental GT, creating quite a collection for himself. As you might have noticed, RDJ is a particular fan of the Audi brand. In addition to the A7 and the R8, he also has himself an AA, a typical symbol of luxury with a price tag north of $80,000. And he just doesn't like automobiles for himself, but shares the love all around, getting his fellow superhero Captain America, aka Chris Evans, a custom-built Camaro with a steering wheel accented with a Captain American logo. Luxury cars aren't his only interests. RDJ also has quite an affinity for high-end watches, and frankly we can't blame him for wanting to look his best. He's got the Jaeger-LeCoultre, the same watch that appears in Iron Man 2 and is worth $92,000. His high-end watch collection also includes the Rolex GMT Master 2 Ghost watch, which he bought for himself and a friend of his because when you're an A-lister, affordability holds little to no meaning for you. With putting out one hit after the other, you would expect RDJ to have a house near the Hollywood studios. Well, you would expect right, since he owns a stunning Malibu mansion worth a solid $3.7 million with a view over the Malibu Lagoon, 3 bedrooms, a backyard with a pool, a fire pit, a hot tub, and a putting green. Of course, when Hollywood life gets a little too much for him, you can find him in his $2.5 million Pacific Palisades home that has a ranch-style design with extra high hedges to keep the nosy paparazzi out. But none of these houses compare to the $10.5 million windmill home he owns in the Hamptons. Of course, it's not just about spending his money. RDJ also likes to reinvest his money through his business called Footprints Coalition, which uses robotics and nanotechnology to clean up the planet. Since wrapping up his role in the Marvel world, RDJ has dedicated his life's earnings towards saving the world from an entirely different villain: climate change. RDJ also has his very own luxury sneaker collection that he's not afraid to splurge on, including Christian Louboutin and Louis Strauss sneakers that he is often seen wearing on red carpets. Setting him back a whopping $2,495, those are not even the most intriguing shoes in his collection. His $2,000 Givenchy wedge sneakers, which sported a 2.5-inch sole, gave him the pedestal he wanted. He loved this pair so much that he even wore them to his very own 50th birthday party extravaganza. And that's a wrap on how Robert Downey Jr. wasted $300 million. What do you think about the relevant question to the video? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.